Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, December 2nd, 2021. We're running out of 2021 to work with. Can't wait to start struggling to make sure I say 2022 correctly. Time is just flying by. We have plenty to get to today, of course, and I won't be able to get to any of it because everybody else is getting to things today instead. And a good thing, too. I could use the break. So this morning, Greg Dworkin obviously joins us with his usual raft of stories. He threatened to do so yesterday, and he follows through on his threat today. And, of course, yesterday, during the 10 o'clock hour when we were unable to monitor things, the oral arguments in the Mississippi abortion case reached the Supreme Court. Plenty of eyes on that. Not mine, so we'll have to borrow Armando's. He's offered them to us along with his observations. Not just his eyes. Oh, you'll get his mouth as well. Don't you worry about that. So we'll bring ourselves up to speed on that. Catching up with the stories of the day, plus the tweet of the day. It starts out each morning. The Kagro in the Morning radio show with Kagro X. That's me. It would be a stupid idea to have a Kagro in the Morning radio show without me, I think. But, unless it's vacation. No, I hadn't thought it through all the way. Anyway, the Kagro in the Morning radio show with Kagro X is live now. And that's all I'm saying because I don't want to get banned on social media, says Bill. Okay, maybe I'll go out on a limb and add one thing. Butterflies is purdy. Well, okay, burn it. I think it's pretty clear that Bill is a radical advocate of critical butterfly theory. And I think we're going to have to burn, Twitter, maybe his house as well. That's the only option we have at this point. Okay, well, we're ready to roll. And let's see what we can queue up this morning. What's been going on this morning on Twitter? Not that much. I don't know. Nothing overwhelming. Nothing jumps out at me as the chatter of the morning. Although I do note with some interest that it's a widening popularity behind in the mainstream media, I guess as we might call it, behind the idea that the pandemic lately has been falling most heavily not just on the unvaccinated, but that it turns out the unvaccinated are, generally speaking, Trump supporters or Republicans or conservatives of some type, and having singled themselves out as vaccine resistors or vaccine hesitant, not entirely political in those lines, but there's a huge ideological component of it. And that, that people have been dancing around it for a while in the mainstream media, saying, well, it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And certainly that's a more accurate label for it than a pandemic among conservative idiots. Or as I have been saying for some time now, that the virus is a neutron bomb for morons. But that's been kind of obvious for a long time. Even before the vaccine was a twinkle in our eye, I was saying it because, of course, there was a conservative effort, a concerted conservative effort to defy the advice, even when it was Donald Trump's government, Donald Trump's administration handing down that advice. Among the resistors, they insisted from the beginning on gathering in large numbers, refusing to wear masks, and then only later did they start refusing the vaccine as well. And so it's something they've done to themselves for a long time and creating their own super spreader events at Sturgis, at protests as in Michigan outside of the Capitol and the governor's mansion there. Sealing their own fate. And I ran into it again yesterday, just in some random thread or another, discussing vaccine hesitancy and the like. And apparently the Republican and conservative and MAGA, I guess, line here is to point out that with the ongoing or the continuing rise of the number of infected and the death toll, now pointing out, well, more people have died during the pandemic under a Biden administration than did under the Trump administration. Of course, the clock ran out on the Trump administration, and they got the lead-in, low-rise tail of the curve, as it were, and they got to work that in. But they've also got the first initial spike. That's true. But they keep pointing to it as some kind of a win, as though you can win by having a pandemic be worse. But they describe the pandemic now as having been worse under Biden than under Trump. But you can't say that and escape the fact that it's been so selective in who it infects and who it kills as a result of the ideological driving of vaccine hesitancy and mask refusal. So, yeah, as somebody said to me on Twitter, they said, nothing says inept presidency more than there being more deaths under, in the last 10 months than under a full year with Trump. But, of course, the only rejoinder for that is nothing says inept citizenry more than accepting, the idea of having all of those deaths weigh on your sector in order to declare a win. I mean, I guess that's the definition of Pyrrhic victory. They keep pointing to their own suicide pact as evidence that Biden has made the pandemic worse. You've made the pandemic worse, and you're dying for it. I mean, at some point, I guess you just throw up your hands and say, that's the way they want it. And, as bipartisan compromise, I think we ought to concede to them what they want. The only danger, of course, is that they also become incubators for weird new variants that might also kill us. We are aware of that. They never were when they said on Jared Kushner's advice, this will be a blue state phenomenon. They never thought about it, backlash affecting them. That is, on the other hand, constantly on my mind. And it's why we say things like, maybe we ought to save them despite themselves. I'm torn. But Greg Dworkin is here, and I think he's pretty solid on it, so we'll hand it over to him. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. You can't use the ideological basis of what they're doing as a choice as to whether or not to treat them. I mean, here we are in Connecticut. We're doing okay, although we're still having a little bit of a rise here, but we're doing better than the rest of New England. And New York City's doing quite well, but we're between New York and Boston. And so Connecticut is pretty dependent upon how those other states do. And the idea that Connecticut can control the pandemic, ignoring the larger New York, Massachusetts population on either side of us is nuts.
Well, build a wall.
Or as the popular word of the day would be, hysterical.
Yeah, it's...
from the womb. Because, women are crazy, and especially the ones who said that, look, if you don't vote like the Supreme Court is everything, we're going to lose Roe, they said in 2016. Being hysterical about that.
Yeah,
but,
right.
People are hysterical about the pandemic, too, because, it's a pejorative just to use the word.
It is. We should be reminded about that. So now we are. Okay.
Anyway, Connecticut doing all right.
Anyway, though.
Virginia, I'm looking at, also doing okay. What's interesting is that the big peaks that drove the numbers last year were between December and February.
Yes. And
so, in other words, after the holidays, everybody gets together, it spreads, and then you spike as the weather gets colder and you push everybody indoors. This year's spike appears to be way less than last year's.
All right. Awesome.
Which is good, but it's still a spike, which is bad. Omicron is around, which is bad, but this is probably a Delta spike, which is good. Yes, Omicron's in the United States, and it's probably more in the United States than we know, but that's just a question of testing for it. Nonetheless,
slow down the testing.
Not much to worry about in terms of Omicron yet. The professionals are worried. They are concerned. They are monitoring. But there's no evidence it's exploding the way Delta did in India.
Okay. Well,
Delta explodes the way Delta did in India. And so there are places like Ohio, for example, who are seeing more hospitalizations now than at any time since last January. January is the reference because that was the last big peak. So you'll hear that. Well, relative to where we are, this is the worst it's been since January. But that's because January was awful. It's actually been pretty good in between, especially over the summer. But it's not summer anymore, and these are things to watch. And the point being, pandemic isn't over. So Biden is, in fact, taking steps. He's going to announce some new stuff today. One of the things that he's going to announce is testing. More than 150 million Americans with private health insurance will be able to get at-home coronavirus tests reimbursed by their insurers. And there'll be an additional 25 million at-home tests to community health centers and rural clinics to make them more available to those who aren't covered by private insurers, and that includes Medicaid.
Okay, that's good.
Biden will call on employers, not mandate, but call on them to provide paid time off to their employees to get boosted.
Oh, all right.
And then there may be some other travel stuff that he puts into place as well. Now, private insurers already cover coronavirus tests administered in doctors' offices and medical facilities, but there's at least 8 at-home tests on the U.S. market. So that would be good.
Yeah.
Now, there's only 6 states that require people to wear masks indoors regardless of their vaccination status.
Okay.
California, New York, and Connecticut require indoor masking for people who are unvaccinated.
I see.
You can't tell, so people around here generally just wear them. That's one of the reasons why we're doing okay. The other is that we're mostly vaxxed for the 2-part series. We're still behind on the 3-part series, which is the full series. And so boosters are the thing. And so that's where things stand there. It's interesting that when you look at where people are doing stuff to help, that it, in fact, helps.
Well, that was probably their intention. So,
the idiot part of the ideological is to hide things that work. Missouri, apparently, the legislator had information that masking helped, and they suppressed that information because they didn't want people to know.
Oh, well, they probably found out in neighboring states and the rest of the country and then called them on the phone and told them in Missouri.
Well, let me give you the opposite. Here's New York City, which is doing incredibly well given where they started, but it's because of where they started that they're doing incredibly well. Vax on Track, says the Daily News, require MTA workers to get vaccinated too. December 1st brought the final New York City agency made to comply with the Mayor de Blasio's life-saving
yourself, but like a loss
is one of the best things he's.
Oh, in and out. Oh dear.
Hey, that was good. Was that me?
I don't know.
I'd like to say it.
Okay. You make any claim you want at this point. I probably won't even hear it. So blame me and I don't hear it.
So basically, New York City's doing well across the board, from hospitals at 95%, schools at 96%, fire department 92%, EMS 94%, cops 87%, sanitation 89%. Everybody's getting safer and keeping their paychecks.
That's good. Yeah, the holdouts are not really materializing. That's good. And okay. I think they're all crisis actors, all the people who said they would quit.
Right. So Daily News says, look, last to the party correction is 77% among uniformed officers, 93% among civilians. That's even before the mandatory part kicks in. It worked. It worked. It worked. Bravo, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. That's rare.
So, yeah, that's all good things. So given all of that, the fact that more Ohioans were hospitalized Wednesday than at any time since COVID-19 surged in January is not necessarily good. And so there's no way it's over. Here's a fascinating story about that, though. We all know what you need to do. You just need to get your vaccine, get your booster if you haven't already. But Brandy Zadrowski has this piece for NBC News about magic dirt.
Sure.
How the internet fueled and defeated the pandemic's weirdest MLM. That's multi-level marketing. Black Oxygen Organics, or BOO,
what?
became a sudden hit in the fringe world of alternative medicines and supplements, where even dirt can go for $110 a bag.
Man, I gotta get in on this. All right.
Black Oxygen Organics is difficult to classify. It was marketed as fulvic acid, a compound derived from decayed plants. It was dug up from an Ontario peat bog. And the guy who was the CEO and selling it basically got rich on this multi-level marketing scheme. He would empower people who would get a commission to go on social media and push it. Yeah. And more than 99% of MLM sellers actually lose money, according to the Consumer Awareness Institute, industry watchdog group. But according to social media posts, Boo's business was booming.
Boo.
I earned $21,000 in bonuses in my first 5 weeks. You've seen all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So what happened is they actually did so well and sold so much that both the Canadian and U.S. regulatory agencies came down hard on them for claiming that this mud that they were selling, that's what it was, mud, was curing things. And so they basically shut them down.
Okay. You can't do that. Black Oxygen.
Black Oxygen Organics is the brainchild of Mark St. Onge, a 59-year-old entrepreneur from Castleman, Ontario. St. Onge, Boo's founder and CEO, didn't respond to calls, texts, emails, or direct messages, but decades of interviews in the local press and more recently on social media offer some details about the Mudman.
What do you do
He's
with
an orthotherapist, naturopath, kinesthetherapist, Reiki master, holistic practitioner, herbalist, and aromatherapist. And as he said in the video posted on YouTube, which has now been taken down, his love of mud began as a child chasing bullfrogs around Ontario bogs. He began to practice orthotherapy, a kind of advanced massage technique to treat pain, which packaging dirt from the local bog to help. He was charged by Canadian authorities with practicing medicine without a license in 1989 and fined $20,000. It didn't stop him, obviously. The clinic went underground. And he sold mud in some form since the early 1990s.
That is bizarre. I don't know how the oxygen part comes in, but okay. I mean, like, I've seen people do mud bath stuff, but I've never heard anybody say it would
Well, it's special mud here.
Yes, right.
He says the doctor said it was the antibiotics, but we think it was the mud.
Sure, right. Right. I also took monoclonal therapies, but there was this mud, you see.
Right. See, so now there's a federal lawsuit and a bunch of other things. Now, we can't technically tell customers to use the product, but we can tell them that the powder is the exact same as before, so go ahead and buy it and sell it, and I'm one of the people pushing it, so I get a commission if I tell you that. That's the kind of messages that show up on the private groups.
Okay.
And, part of the issue, of course, is they're taking advantage of people who are just really scared.
Yeah,
and so there's some, look, this is garbage, anti-boo groups that have also shown up.
Yeah, now we're going to be banned.
Right, and, one of them is somebody named...
Mr. Clean. He hates
Mr. Clean, he never said what I just said.
I don't know.
Kira Manchester.
Oh, okay.
Who said, I don't feel like people are stupid, Manchester said of the people who purchased and even sold Boo. I think that they're desperate or vulnerable and they've been preyed upon, and you get somebody to say, hey, I got this product that cures everything, when you're desperate like that, you might listen. And so I thought that was interesting, and, that's why people buy what they buy. But by the way, it's also one of the reasons why they vote the way they vote.
Yes.
People aren't stupid, they're desperate, and they're vulnerable. And so when you get a con man or a sleazebag, or a preacher,
pageant
Elmer Gantry who's just trying to bamboozle people, they fall for it.
I guess so. I mean, it seems so hard to understand how you fall for dirt, but I mean, as dumb as the other things have been.
Well, you have to go look for it. That's the thing. You're looking for something other than medicine. Other than doctors.
I mean,
so you're already on a track to have an open mind about it.
I mean, there's open, and then there's like I open the door and then I tear the wall down. There should be no separation. Anything could be medicine. Lick the wallpaper. It might be medicine.
Yeah, you never know.
Right.
So, hey, listen, is it any better or worse than soaking in borax?
It's
to suck the vaccine out of you.
I mean, in the end, it's not. But give me a packaged good anytime, and I think I could sell more of it than dirt. But then I guess if you put the dirt in a package,
FDA has a role, and that of course leads me to my next topic, which is what government does and why it's there. And so, let's just talk about it in terms of government shutdown.
All right.
House Appropriations Chair Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut, I would add, announces funding bill will run through February 18th. Deadline is tomorrow night to pass it before shutdown deadline.
Yes. Friday
deadline is Friday.
Cool. Midnight.
Now, the government runs out of money mid-December, so the government official time we didn't fund the government is Friday, but the money runs out a couple of weeks later. So you have a little bit of leeway there. Not much, but a little.
Yes. You can.
So that's part of the deal, always.
Legislatively fund the government, but if there's no money...
then you can't continue. So Lauren DeJean-Schulman has an excellent short tweet, which will take us to the break, and then we'll talk a little bit about political aspects of Roe, with Armando coming on at 10 to talk about legal aspects of Roe. Lauren DeJean-Schulman writes, once more, we're unnervingly and unnecessarily close to a shutdown of the federal government. Mm-hmm. Such an event can feel distant and has been purposefully spun to minimize the impact. This thread instead tells the story of the many potential harms of a shutdown.
Well, all right. We've had some experience with those.
Some context. Fiscal year 1997 was the last year all 12 regular appropriations bills to fund the government were completed by October 1st.
Yeah.
It's been 25 years.
Congratulations, everyone. Yeah, it's now a regular occurrence.
Yeah, but that's a long time. Okay?
Yeah. Well, when you teach people you can just do a CR, they come to rely on it.
There have been 21 shutdowns of a day or longer since the Carter administration. And then Lauren posts a GIF of Loci saying, this is where you say you had one job.
Okay.
You probably remember the 35-day partial government shutdown from December 2018 to January 2019.
No. Yes.
800,000 civil servants, 800,000 were not paid during this time, and some of them were still required to work. Mm-hmm. The CBO estimated that the government shutdown cost U.S. economy $3 billion in permanent loss over that month, which, remember, was the holidays. 2,500 retailers around the country were unable to accept food stamps and any other kind of SNAP.
Oh, right.
Small Business Administration stopped processing loan guarantees when the shutdown began, meaning thousands of firms couldn't get the money they needed to start or expand the companies. 40,000 immigration court hearings were canceled. Employers across the country were unable to complete E-Verify checks.
Yes.
So, Homeland Security, EPA inspections halted.
Oh, no. True.
To offer an understatement, we had a lot of stuff going on in public health right now. And in the last shutdown, the FDA had to stop accepting new applications or fees from the pharmaceutical industry to review new drug applications.
That would have no impact on us right now whatsoever.
Oh, and by the way, when the FDA shuts down, it can't do things like scrutinize companies like Boo.
Oh, yeah, right. It can't
so
do Boo.
That's the tie-in there. I mean, you can't expect to get rid of the shysters if you shut the government down that's empowered to get rid of the shysters.
Yeah, that plus, I mean, if it were to coincide with approving boosters for kids ages 5 to 12 or something like that.
Or looking at, COVID pills.
Yeah, right. All the new therapies that are available that we'd have to wait on because government shutdown. Thanks, Mike Lee.
Right. Or maybe even look at people 16 to 17, 16 and older should get boosters. Over the busy holiday season, shortages in air traffic controllers caused flight delays. Native American tribes faced food and medicine shortages. This is back from the government shutdown we were discussing, the longer one, the 35-day one. And funds for critical services because the shutdown stopped federal funds used for stocking food pantries. Organizations that help victims of domestic violence and sexual abuse had to cut back on life-saving services. National parks like Joshua Tree suffered irreparable damage. And with 85% of federal employees outside the D.C. region, many local economies suffered. In Ogden, Utah, where about 5,000 people are employed by IRS and the Forest Service, business at restaurants dropped by half. FDA had to scale back food safety inspections. Forced to work without pay, many federal prison staff called in sick. And many federal FBI-led investigations were stalled. So just to give you an idea of, what difference does it make if the government shuts down? It makes a huge difference.
Yes, they always say that. And then they always insist that they could live without it, but then they
can't.
When they
and
don't
so
get it.
McConnell says, we'll open, just that we want it on our terms. So we want to dictate the terms of how long it stays open for. Where those CR things come in. So that's really where the negotiations are coming. So will it shut down on Friday? I don't know. You never know with them because they're nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, they're ideologues.
That is true. On Tuesday, when we spoke to Joan about it, she was feeling generally like, well, there's no particular reason at the moment why Republicans would gain from shutting it down. But because they're crazy, there's always a possibility. But it's
they just want to stick it to Democrats.
Forget it. Yeah. And all it takes in the
that
Senate
is their entire ideology at this point. And so, that spills into how they approach the pandemic.
Yeah.
You can't get the pandemic under control from their point of view. There's a Democrat in charge.
Yeah.
That's bad for us politically.
Yep.
So we don't want the government to function. People will start thinking the government can function under Democrats. So best to shut it down. And that's really literally why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah. The kink in the plan is that they have also said, we can keep the death toll high and blame Biden for it if we all die.
Mm.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, moderate House Democrats, according to the New Washington Post this morning, are urging leaders to pass legislation focused squarely on the economic issues Americans are facing. That is to say, after they do bilateral infrastructure and build back better, then they immediately turn to speeding up the process on a massive trade, supply chain, and global competitiveness bill known as USICA, with Pelosi summoning committee chairs to her office today to finalize it. Pass it early next year.
USICA. They got to work on that.
That is the plan.
Okay. Well, at least we know that they have a plan or something.
Yeah, the problem is, of course, that Republicans, as Perry Bacon points out, get rewarded for obstruction, and Democrats never get rewarded for going around them.
Yeah, right. So
more on that after the
playing field. Okay, so what a new great idea the moderates have brought. Is they saying kitchen table, bread and butter?
Yeah.
Always coming up with new stuff, these guys. All right, We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm still looking at Loki. Did you say Loki? Is that his name, actually? Is that how they pronounce it in northern lands? Loki? Yeah, Loki for us. I'm still looking at this. You had one job. I can't remember what that job was, but I know I had it. So anyway, we can do a different job, and that might turn out to be it. I don't know. I had one job, so I just tried to do it by process of elimination. Eventually,
Perry Bacon points out, in last year's election, Americans did not punish Republicans for their radical anti-democratic turn with a resounding electoral defeat. More than a year later, we can clearly see horrible and potentially irreversible implications of that. Was that our last and best chance to save our democracy?
Oh.
It seemed possible at the time of the election that Biden might carry states like Iowa, Ohio, and Texas. Now, he won convincingly but not resoundingly, decisively but not overwhelmingly. And the limited victory had three huge negative implications for American democracy. First, the Republican Party felt no need to change. Second, maintaining control at the state level has allowed Republicans to lock in their power for years. Here's an example of what that means. Last night, you may not have heard about it, Texas restricts medication abortion, escalating war on reproductive rights. Months after the state enacted a 6-week abortion ban, another bill went into effect, largely cutting off Texans' remaining access to abortion care. Greg Abbott quietly signed another anti-choice bill that restricts access to medication abortion. That restriction became law, cutting off pills being sent in the mail, courier, delivery, and specifically requiring physicians to do an in-person exam before providing medication. Punishable by up to 2 years in jail and a fine of $10,000. The law only applies to doctors.
Wow. That's fun.
Right. So, yeah, you could use the pill, but you can't get it because doctors can't prescribe it. Well,
Okay.
the way to deal with that is to make it over the counter.
Yeah. Or sell it in border states.
Sell it by boo.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right. Put it in the dirt. Just
Put it
eat
in
this.
the dirt.
Okay. Wow.
Anyway, so
Work.
so what does it mean for people to get local control? That's what it means to get local control. And it was interesting that during the hearing at the Supreme Court, which was broadcast live, so you could listen to it.
No wonder so many people were hearing it. Okay.
I happened to be with a neutral, non-political person. I would say middle of the road, center right kind of guy, but will vote Democrat based on issues.
Okay.
Certainly voted for Biden,
issues.
not for Trump, anti-Trumper. And we're listening to a brilliant set of questions at the very beginning by Sonia Sotomayor.
Heard about this, yes.
In fact, it was so interesting that an entire column was written about it by Dana Milbank. Roe is dead. Roberts Court stench will live forever.
Oh. All right.
Because Sotomayor said that. If you go around changing things based on politics, we'll never get rid of that stench for the Supreme Court, in other words, is what she said. And then she honed in on the fact that the Solicitor General from Mississippi, who was presenting the case, who, of course, in these proceedings is known as General. General, why are you saying that? And Sotomayor honed in on. So basically, your entire argument is based on, even though you're not saying it, that life begins at conception, but that's religious and not legal. And so why aren't you right up front about saying that that's really the heart of this case? Well, it's really not. We're this, that, and everything else. And she pointed out a lot of the things that he was saying, such as, it's important that things have changed since Roe and Casey, Roe 50 years ago and Casey 30 years ago, that, make us relook at this. And there's no reason that a previous precedent should apply. And Sotomayor says, like what? Like what's really changed? Because viability is still 23, 24 weeks. What's changed scientifically? Well, fetuses feel pain. And Sotomayor said, well, that's a fringe opinion from just about nobody. And you can't use that as an example of how things have changed. Only fringe people think that fetuses feel pain. Just because they move doesn't mean anything. Dead people move sometimes.
Oh.
Which is true.
Well,
you can have a twitch. You can have that doesn't mean that you're still alive. You're technically brain dead and can still have some sort of, vital sign function.
Okay.
So she just did a really clear and easy to understand demolition of his points. And I'm listening to it with this, center-right anti-Trumper guy. And he turns to me and he says, wow, I never really thought about that. She really demolished him.
Oh.
And I
said,
yeah, but it doesn't make any difference because they're going to vote the way they want because they can.
Yes, and also that at the same time there were people who are very Trumpy who were listening to the same thing saying, wow, she's really dumb, she doesn't know what she's doing, and the Solicitor General really demolished her. So.
Not that many people thought that. They
Not
just
very
thought
many, but they do
that
think
Kavanaugh and Barrett were pretty clear on where they were going. Neil Katyal had great insight an observation prior to this discussion, which really helped, which is to say, so you're about to hear some arguments, and please understand, these are the justices talking to each other. They're certainly not talking to you.
True.
They really couldn't give a crap about what you think. And they're hardly talking to the Solicitor General, which we'll refer to as General.
Dope.
He is there as a foil for them to talk to each other. And that's the only thing going on here. You have to approach this hearing as such. So I thought that was pretty good. And when you listen to it that way, I said to my friend, it's got nothing to do with how you heard it. Mm-hmm. Question is how Roberts heard it, how Gorsuch heard it. Doesn't matter how Thomas heard it because we already know how he's going to vote as well as Alito. The point is what does Kavanaugh and Gorsuch do? Because that's going to determine what happens, and it's pretty clear from their questioning what they're going to do. That's why everybody was so pessimistic about it. Yeah,
I mean, that stench line seems pretty well aimed at Roberts. This will be your stench, sir.
Yeah, pretty much. So they may get Roberts, but they won't get, enough. So, again, that's back to Perry Bacon, maintaining control at the state level has allowed Republicans to lock in their powers for years and perhaps decades, something that isn't supposed to happen in democracies. North Carolina, Ohio, Texas, and other states, Republicans have adopted highly aggressive gerrymanders that make it almost impossible for Democrats to win control of the legislature at state level.
Yeah.
Now, they're trying to do it with House districts. They'll have a little less success there, but they'll have success. And then third, Democrats didn't win enough power in 2020 to counteract the GOP's anti-democratic shift. Manchin Cinema, for example, you only have 50 seats, so everybody's dependent on Manchin and Cinema. Right? Cal Cunningham wins. It's a different story entirely.
Mm-hmm.
So all that explains why the erosion of democracy is continuing, even with Biden in the White House. There's many easily foreseeable ways that erosion could accelerate, like 2022 Republicans or Trump-like figure 2024. It could be stopped or reversed as well, but at least right now the path seems much less clear. So to be sure, American democracy is eroding more slowly than it would have if Trump won, but it's still eroding. So people need to be aware. It was a very interesting podcast that Charlie Sykes from the Bulwark did with Amy Walter from the Cook Political Report, basically pointing out the obvious, that up until now, the pro-life faction has been the one passionate and motivated, but that all changed as of yesterday, or at least it will when they finally come down with the decision that was foreshadowed by yesterday's questioning. And so whether that motivates people to vote in 2022 who otherwise aren't political, like my friend who was listening, remains to be seen. But it's one of the many reasons why, as bad as things look right now, this may be, the darkest hour before the dawn kind of stuff. It's not a fair trade. I don't want us to lose Roe so that we can win in 2022. That's not what I'm saying. But consequences have actions, and actions have consequences. And so, we'll see what happens after that. Meanwhile, there is some favorable news. This is a piece by Jen Rubin summarizing where things stand. Those are all capital letters. Trump's stonewalling on the January 6th investigations crumbling. Seems the courts have had it with the attempts by former President Donald Trump and his cronies to evade their legal obligations to respond. The three-judge panel in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit was skeptical, verging on dismissive, of the notion advanced by Trump's counsel that he, not the sitting president, should be able to decide whether to waive executive privilege. In more than 3.5 hours of argument, there's little indication the court seriously entertained the idea that the former president can veto the current president's decisions on executive privilege. As Christian Vanderbrook points out, if a sitting president can be forced to sit for a deposition in a civil case like Clinton and Paula Jones, there's no reason why a former president should be shielded from answering questions under our oath about attempting to overthrow an election and inciting an insurrection. So at the bottom of this, Trump may not testify, but if he's called to testify, that's a big deal. In fact, former federal prosecutor Barbara McQuaid tells me the judges seem skeptical as to whether a court should get involved in this dispute at all. And that means that if they say, nope, you have to turn, the National Archives has to turn over all of the information to the January 6th committee, Trump then goes ahead and he appeals to the Supreme Court. And as Jen Rubin writes, there's no guarantee the court will grant review. In its recent decision in Trump versus Mazars, they rejected Trump's claim of absolute immunity while he was in office. The chance it'll recognize his power to subvert the current president's waiver of executive privilege and Congress's legitimate interest is slim, even for this court. And so when you talk about Roe, I think basically whenever you mention the Supreme Court, you have to say stuff like, even for this court.
Yeah, true.
Like, this may be too far, even for this court.
That's the only way you make sense, or you sound sensible when you say, oh, they might not do this terrible thing.
But if everybody adds even for this court, that gives you an idea of the kind of underlying political turmoil
where
a Roe decision would make. Because if people just simply accept that this court is even this court, well, that's bad for them.
Yes.
Right? That's the kind of thing that motivates folks. Because one of our problems, we have the numbers, we just don't have the motivation. Well, this is motivation. Meanwhile, the efforts of Trump flunkies Bannon, Clark, and Mark Meadows, Jeffrey Clark, to avoid cooperating with January 6th committee based on former president's invocation of privilege is going poorly. Bannon faces contempt charges, and now so does Jeffrey Clark. That was voted on last night.
Yes.
So that has to go, that was committee, then it has to go to the House, and then it has to be referred to Justice, and then Justice has to do something before he's indicted. Right. But he's facing all of that.
He is.
Meadows knows
That's
it.
True.
And so he's cooperating.
Yeah.
Meadows, the former White House chief of staff, apparently saw the handwriting on the wall and seems to be cooperating with the committee. Chairman Benny Thompson put out a written statement on Tuesday confirming that Meadows has been engaging with the select committee through his attorney, has produced records, and will soon appear for an initial deposition. Now, appearing isn't testifying, but that's certainly progress. So yes. Finally, yesterday, the committee interviewed, Tuesday, not Wednesday, yesterday, but Tuesday, interviewed Brad Raffensperger, as we talked about. Right. So that's how one builds a case, witness by witness, forcing cooperation, document production. And with courts evidencing no interest in Trump's phony privileges claim, we might be reaching a point where we learn who did what in the plot. And that's bad news for the former insurrectionist in chief, who I might add, as Christian Vandenberg points out, might get a subpoena himself.
He might. And then, I don't know, we'll find out what they'll ask him when somebody publishes a book.
Right. But Jeff Rosen said, okay, well, not Rosen, Jeffrey Clark said,
Jeffrey, yes.
If you subpoena me, I might plead the fifth.
Yes.
Well, if you have a publicized hearing on TV with him pleading the fifth, that's a big deal, just like Trump getting and refusing a subpoena is a big deal.
Sure.
These are all motivating things, even if you don't get your way, or as somebody put it on Twitter this morning, when Republicans don't get their way, they organize and come up with a plan for 50 years worth of harassment until they get their way. And when Democrats don't get their way, they say, well, we got most of what we wanted. Oh, well, that's the way it goes. Bye.
Yeah.
Not necessarily so. You overturn Roe v. Wade, that's not the reaction you're going to get.
Hope not. I mean, like I said, we don't want to make it dependent on that, but if it happens anyway, we might as well foster the backlash.
And backlash there will be.
Okay.
Interesting here. Senator Collins, the moderate Republican from Maine, favors passing legislation to enshrine the protections of Roe v. Wade into law, her office says. Immediately, Bill Scher, centrist,
yes,
writes, before Gorsuch, Collins could have said she wouldn't vote for any nominee that didn't have bipartisan support, and therefore dooming Gorsuch.
Yeah.
She could have organized a moderate bloc to balance the court and depolarize the country. She didn't. No. She failed to lead. No performative fig leaf can cover up her legacy now.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a serious thing that she's weighing. It would be a serious thing to do, and they could do it, but how will you get past the Senate?
Well, the funny thing, I think, which is gallows humor, is if Schumer comes up with legislation to do what she suggested, she'll vote against it.
Yeah, I mean, essentially. Or she might, unless
well, she has the filibuster. She can hide behind it. She knows that. But she'll probably vote against it anyway because in your face.
Right. That could be, right, at the last minute. Why not? What the hell? Just do one more. But if she is insistent on continuing the charade, then she could just say, well, I'm not voting for cloture, but I totally support the underlying bill.
Right. Dahlia Lithwick puts her finger on all of this. She has a piece in Slate. The headline and the subheading just tell the whole story there, though. SCOTUS will gaslight us until the end. Oral arguments today made clear that this court will overturn Roe and that they'll insist on their own reasonableness the whole time.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
So Susan Collins was only being reasonable when she decided that she was going to vote for Kavanaugh.
Yeah, because
promising us that he would do the exact opposite of what he's doing, and then she'll come up with some excuse afterwards that, well, it doesn't really matter, and besides, vote for me anyway.
At a minimum, she's deeply concerned.
Yeah.
So.
Or troubled.
Right.
Might even get to the point of troubled.
Ooh. Well, that would be serious, wouldn't it?
Right. So to finish that piece, again, Armando will do the legal aspects of it, but political aspects are pretty big. And one of the things is that it becomes really, really hard, as Charlie Sykes pointed out to Amy Walter, for people like Collins at the state and federal level to hide behind this anymore.
I guess
you can't
just end her career and walk away.
You can't be against abortion, except in the case of rape and incest, because the Republican Party won't allow you to be. That's what was at the heart of the argument between Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh, I mean, they did make mention of that.
That was started the whole thing.
Really?
Marjorie Taylor Greene went after Nancy Mace because she is in favor of exceptions in the case of rape and incest, and therefore accused her of being pro-abortion.
Ah.
That's what started the whole thing.
I didn't, I mean, she made mention of it, but, when she says things, they don't make any sense, typically, so I didn't really track it down.
Well, the point is her and the rest of the Republican Party that backs her trying to bully everybody else into going along with their extremist views.
Yes, well, it's worked
terrifically. And if Nancy
for her.
Mace is the kind of person that isn't extreme enough, Charlie Sykes is making the point that you can't hide, people like Collins can't hide behind this anymore. This is either, where are you,
Mm-hmm.
Are you on the side of Marjorie Taylor Greene, which is the position of the Republican Party, or are you not?
Yeah. Yes. That's a good point. I accept it. Yeah, well, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, I'm surprised. I guess I'm a little bit, I don't know. She made mention of the pro-abortion or the pro-life issue, but it didn't make any sense to me at the time, so I just figured it was, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Who knows?
Right. In Dana Milbank's piece, by the way, he comes up with the Sotomayor line that got my friend's attention here. Public opinion hasn't changed. The science hasn't fundamentally changed. No new legal theory has been promulgated. The only difference is the court now has a majority hell-bent on settling scores in the culture wars.
Yes.
Quote, will this institution survive the stench that this creates in the public perception that the Constitution and its reading are just political acts, just as Sonia Sotomayor asked her colleagues? I don't see how that's possible.
Yeah, she's right.
Right.
And there was another aspect to her questioning that I did see mentioned, but I haven't heard yet this morning. But I guess she must have put it to the Mississippi Council that somewhere along the line they come up with that there was an admission that Mississippi legislators moved forward with their bill not because there was any significant changes, as they listed all those possible changes, scientific, cultural, political changes. The only thing that's changed is, well, now we have a new court. Let's try the same old thing, but with a new court and see if it works.
Right. Well, that's what I was saying in terms of using, for example, fetal pain as their excuse for new things that made them change their mind. And Sotomayor says, that's bullshit.
Yes. Right.
Firstly, it's a fringe opinion that you're trying to push as change when there is no change. Viability hasn't changed. And viability is at the core of this, since that's the standard that Roe and Casey essentially use, and you're trying to throw out viability altogether because you're trying to say the conception starts at life, except you don't want to say that because it's religious and you know it.
Right. And if you really believe that, and I think you do believe that, but I don't know why you're not saying it. What difference does 15 weeks make if 15 weeks ago was when life started?
Right. And I'll finally finish. Hopefully this will set up Armando for, I'm looking forward to an excellent second part of the show where he talks about all of this. But E.J. Dionne then ties everything together and says, on Tuesday, 4 high school students, 14, 16, 17, were fatally shot by a 15-year-old classmate firing a pistol with 15-round magazines. Less than 24 hours later, Supreme Court majorities, it seems on the verge of weakening the nation's gun laws, heard arguments in a case that could lead to tougher restrictions on abortion. So please tell me, what can the words pro-life possibly mean when the same people who want to constrain abortion are eager to make it easier for Americans to obtain and carry deadly weapons? How is it pro-life for a nation to accept school shootings as a routine part of our daily news feed? Can it possibly be pro-life to pretend that because no law will ever end shootings, it's not worth trying to pass anything that might make them less likely?
Yeah.
Let me stipulate, I know people opposed to abortion rights who are in fact consistently pro-life. They fight for tougher gun laws, oppose the death penalty, and support far more help for poor women when they bring children into the world. Even if you disagree with them on abortion, you should bless them for their witness and their moral consistency. But that group's a small minority. The political movement trying to outlaw abortion, the conservatives on the Supreme Court, judging from oral arguments, seem quite comfortable with being pro-gun and anti-abortion. Against all the evidence in countries with stricter gun laws and far lower gun homicide rates, the pro-gun, anti-abortion crowd insists such a massively armed citizenry protects life.
That is their thinking. I am wondering. Really, yeah. I'm wondering when we're going to start benefiting from the practice of the more guns will make us safer idea. I mean,
Right. And the last thing I have to
been a
add,
while
when
now.
it comes to what the Supreme Court did yesterday in terms of their discussion, is Will Cubison made an observation. He said, talking with my wife, it reminds me that, having a baby is still, I'm paraphrasing him because I can't find his exact quote, is still a miracle of life. I mean, it's amazing things work out as well as they do.
Yes.
I mean, the fact of the matter is that only 85% of pregnancies, come to fruition at the end. And unfortunately, there's still 10, 12, 15% miscarriage rate in the first trimester. And then issues, not quite as common, but issues after that. Mm-hmm. And his point is, these old conservative judges are treating birth as if it's like putting on your shoes. Nothing ever goes wrong. What's the big deal?
Right. Yeah, I mean, actually, that did spring to mind when you were discussing fetal pain. I'm like, there's a lot of pain involved in this, and not all of it is fetal.
Well,
there's
that's
another
the
party
thing.
here.
The rights of women, the proponents of what Mississippi is doing say, well, Harry Blackman and the Roe people just created a new right. I hope Armando addresses this. No. Created a new right just out of whole cloth. And I don't know if it was Kagan or Sotomayor who said, well, basically, you're trying to create a whole new right for the fetus that doesn't exist either.
Yeah, right.
And how's that different?
It isn't. And I don't know. I guess, yeah. This will happen. It occurs to me now. I'm thinking about, again, still stuck on the pain thing. I mean, I guess if your laws and your norms and the framework in which you think about this stuff is all framed by people whose participation in the birthing process traditionally was sitting in the waiting room for the announcement, hey, it's over. All the hard work has been done. You have a son. And then they all have cigars or whatever.
Yeah. The women's work is done. Wasn't that
right.
great?
Yeah. We took her in the other room there and
Pat
we
me on the
stayed
back,
here.
Boy.
Right. Congratulations. You're done. I mean, now that's less the norm, and people are, fathers are very frequently now in on all the action, sort of, kind of observing it. Yeah.
The court will probably say you can't do that anymore.
Right. Oh, yeah, right. Won't that be interesting? You need to get a release from the fetus in order to observe this. I'm sorry, he's a person. You can't just come in here with a video camera. Get out of here. You need to have a release. I mean, even when they're there and as coaches and support, like, okay, it's what coaching and supporting, but I don't know. I'm taking a look at one of you is screaming. The other is not. I think that's pretty indicative of what's really going on here. And oddly, of course, the one who's screaming doesn't get any say in it. That is bizarre. What a bad system, to say the least.
Well, anyway, that's my piece for today.
Okay.
We'll give the ball to you and Armando, and you guys can carry it down the field and score a touchdown and hopefully hit a home run.
Yeah. Of course, it'll only be on the legal points
and
of
score
all
a goal.
This because, neither of us are going to be in any position to tell you what it's like to actually participate in any of these things we're going to argue about. Oh, well. Okay. Thank you, Craig. I appreciate it, and carrying us all the way to 10 o'clock or nearly is a great feat these days. And all right, well, Armando will take
Abby's
over
been
there.
very good lately.
Oh yeah,
she's sitting here by my feet,
hasn't
hasn't barked. I guess we haven't had a lot of trucks rumble down at this particular time of day.
The supply chain thing slowed down the deliveries and therefore the barking.
Well, apparently, the supply chain thing is actually getting pretty good.
Then her barking should be about 30% more audible.
And gas prices are coming down. Of course, you don't hear about that because it's not news, right?
Right. Well, because gas prices do that sort of stuff all the time. They go up, they go down, and it's not usually the president's doing. But when they go up, it's his fault. And when they go down, it's, that's markets or something. I don't know. Look away. Afghanistan. Thank you.
Right. Speaking of look away, here's some good news I see. Joe Lawler tweets somewhat facetiously, I heard Ken Burns is doing a 500-hour, 30-episode podcast on Get Back.
Oh. I have to watch that, too.
I watched part of it.
Did you?
Great.
Okay.
Of course, I'm old enough to remember them.
Yes, right. So it's for you, it's just you were already back. It's not a matter of getting back so much as the rest of you get where I am. But Where is it? I don't even know where to stream it. Is that it?
Disney Plus.
Okay. Disney
You'll find
Plus.
it on Disney Plus, but the thing that you'll love
Disney Plus
is watching Paul treat George like a younger brother.
Oh, okay.
For good or for ill, that's what will strike you. I'm telling you in advance.
All right.
And it's well worth it just for that.
It's not a spoiler or anything.
No, because everybody knows that that's how it worked anyway. But what the documentary makes really clear is Paul's in charge, John's a genius, Ringo's quiet and just keeps the thing together by not arguing with anybody.
Gotta have one of those.
George had his own opinion that the others weren't all that interested in hearing sometimes.
Well, interesting. Yeah, I guess there's no such thing as a spoiler in a documentary, is there? Unless you haven't
not
done
about
your
them,
work.
and everybody knows that that's the case. But it's all about the creative work of making music, and it's brilliant, and it all works.
Very good. I will make that a weekend assignment if I can find some time.
Yeah, well, just watch the first hour. It's 8 hours. You don't have to watch everything at once. But the way it works, since they're just filming, this is what happened this day, this is what happened that day. You can tune in and tune out as needed.
Oh, okay.
Watch the first day or two, and then you can pick it up later.
I'll try that. Sounds like a good series. Okay. Well,
all right.
I can handle
Take
that.
Care,
Thank you.
And I'll talk to you on Monday.
Very good. We'll look forward to that, as well as speaking to Armando in just a few minutes. Excellent.
Yay.
He's
Take
still
care.
engaged on Twitter there, though. Okay. Thanks, Greg. And, almost time for our outro music. Like I said, I see Armando still fully engaged on Twitter, so hopefully he has an alarm set or something like that, or is possibly listening to the show while he's typing these things to people. That's some difficult multitasking to take care of. Okay. So, yes, closer look at proceedings in the Supreme Court yesterday. Once again, I remind you, just from a legal perspective, not so much from a political, well, there'll be some political angle to it, but cultural or gender perspective. That, as between the two of us, or the three of us, including Greg, we won't be able to provide you. We probably could provide you if we had, say, brought women into the picture. But today, All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Oh my, we're going to have to do that over the addition of Armando to the show. Yeah, I'm going to continue with my explanation / apology ahead of time. I mean, I guess really, as I said just before the break, we could have done these things differently and planned it. I mean, we didn't plan any of this. This was just Armando saying, hey, I've got some things to say, and me saying, okay, sure. So I hope this audience is used to what we do here and how we do it to not bear any grudge for the fact that we didn't invite a panel of women to discuss this issue. It's not the way we should have handled it, but of course, on the other hand, this is sort of seat of the pants stuff. And what can I tell you? Believe it or not, there were men who were concerned yesterday, and we have some legal things to say, and I understand it won't touch on every aspect of this issue or even some of the most important aspects of this issue. But there are, of course, other podcasts that will excel at that and bring you that and more. It's just, it would be worse for us to now ignore this big issue that's hanging out here, not only because, not just because there are other people who can analyze it differently or better, but and we have an obligation to acknowledge that this is something that will have an impact on all of society, and that's a good angle from which to approach it. And also, we might learn something interesting about the legal aspects of this and where else it can impact you. If for some reason you're listening to the show and you still think that, well, it might be a terrible thing, but it's really only something that affects women because it's abortion, and I don't have a problem with it. I have an inkling that the analysis of what went on yesterday in the context of abortion will be expanding on that and demonstrating for you the logic that's used to dismantle abortion rights can be used to dismantle anything. If you can make up whatever you want and invent new doctrine out of whole cloth, don't think your interests aren't at risk just because you think you have no interest in abortion. One, you're wrong about abortion, and two, you're wrong about every other part of that too. So good morning, Armando. How are you?
Yeah, good morning. I mean, I don't know what spurred that. I don't know if people think it needs to be
No.
connected to a larger issue, and it is. But I mean, just on the basics, half of our population in the country,
Yes.
well, half of half, if I think is the result that would be the Kavanaugh result. It throws it back to the states. That's the moderate position. Well, half of the population, those people living in red states, are going to have a fundamental constitutional right eliminated.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty big deal without saying much else, and I'm going to say much else, and I'm not even going to focus much on the women part, which may upset the women, but I think that is so fundamental. I think that it's almost, what more can I say? Someone is getting a fundamental constitutional right taken from them.
Yes.
By a radical politicized court. So that, I mean, what
that
I think
is worth the
that's
analysis.
Fundamental, and everybody should be outraged about that. But I was spurred to call you to talk about it, not to just say that. Everybody tells you that. If I have anything to add to the conversation, it's going to be what I think it means about this institution that people have decided should be respected, and frankly, as you know, David, as we've talked about, it shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. It is just another political institution that we should exercise as much of our power over, including expanding it until we get not a norms-based, but a frankly constitutionally amended based real notion of how to make it a neutral body that isn't just a political football. And that's a long time coming. So in the meantime, I'm for exerting force because the politicization was so stark yesterday, and I don't mean it in the sense that that it wasn't political before. All the decisions have been political. All of them are. I mean, the cases the Supreme Court has been taking are all political for the most part. They'll do a patent thing once in a while, and a trademark case, and other federal law things interpreting some basic stuff when you can argue whether they're right or wrong, but it's not political. Yeah, but most of what they're doing now is political.
Yeah, that's true. The mix of what they've taken has changed, and people might not realize it because they just either were ignoring or it wasn't that widely reported when they dealt with the routine business of the Supreme Court, like you say.
They'll always throw in, 5 cases like that a year. You'll get some bankruptcy procedure case, and that's fine. Even what you might have thought was routine, like, well, I'm reviewing this agency rule stuff, that ends up being political too now because of the stupid non-delegation doctrine.
Right. And
but to focus on yesterday, did you notice, and I would ask people if they noticed, what Justice Breyer did in his first moment of talking? He did not really ask a question. He made a speech.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And his speech was about what?
I don't
know. The legitimacy of this institution. And if you overturn Roe, and he cited from the Casey, the Planned Parenthood v. Casey case from 1992, which, if you follow the issue, that's the case that reaffirmed Roe as good constitutional law. Mm-hmm. Roe was decided 48 years ago. It will not live to 50 in real terms. I don't know if Roberts can fake it, but to pretend that it's still good law, but it doesn't look good. Kavanaugh, as I said, is trying to say the neutral position is let it go back to the states. Yeah. So that's not the neutral position. You're trying to fake it into being it. It's not. Overturning Roe is overturning Roe. Overturning Casey is overturning Casey, and that's what they're going to do. Will they admit it? 3 absolutely will. Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch. I mean, there's just zero doubt about that. Those are 3 votes for overturning Roe and Casey. So stare decisis means nothing to them, and that's fine. Honestly, I prefer the honesty here as opposed to Roberts' nonsense. Now, Roberts being addressing Breyer's concern. I don't know if you saw, this was all political. It wasn't even legal. It wasn't even remotely legal. It was so nakedly politics being talked about the legitimacy of the institution. If they think we're just another political institution, well, that's what you are. And Breyer's laying out, so if you overturn these cases, that's what this institution is going to be viewed as, and no one's going to respect us as an institution ever again, which you shouldn't respect them now, by the way. But he's not wrong in the public perception, because even the media will have to deal with it a little bit. Mm-hmm. Roberts is trying to shoehorn this Mississippi law, which its essence is to depart from the viability standard. Now, what is the viability standard? The viability standard is the rubric that the Supreme Court first came up with in Roe. And at the time, the science was 28 weeks, more or less, which is 2/3, 2 trimesters of a pregnancy. So basically there was, under Roe, a complete ban on any prohibition in the first 2 trimesters. And in the third, you could ban, but you had to have exceptions for the health of the mother, et cetera. You did not. The Roe doesn't actually touch on rape and incest unless you say health, and that somehow goes to mental health, in which case it probably does. But the reality is, 95% of abortions are in the first 2 trimesters, 85% are in the first trimester. But nonetheless, that viability was key to that. Now, it's funny that, and I think you'll appreciate this, David, that John Roberts kept pulling out from Blackman's papers some note that he said viability was dicta, or viability was whatever he wrote in his notes. Sort of a legislative history for the court idea, right?
Yeah. Similar.
Well, except, legislative history, is actually written. It's the remarks made on the record. It's the speeches, it's the comments that are in the legislative history, it's the different drafts. It's all public. There's no secret papers. By the way, the other side of the coin was Roberts complaining that people were releasing their papers too soon on the court. He said that about 4 times because they're about to release Justice Stevens' papers. And he doesn't like that. And he's trying to talk everybody into not releasing their papers. So he says, see, this is what happens, you liberals.
Releasing your papers? Yeah, well, that's why they're doing it.
Right. Well, so anyway, whatever Blackman wrote, it doesn't actually hold up. I mean, the opinion of the court is actually not what Justice Blackman thought. I know he was the author of the opinion, but that doesn't matter. It's what the court itself articulates, and what the court articulated is in the opinion itself. And viability was well understood, always understood, to be the linchpin to determining when the state's interest in the fetus can, in a balancing test, overcome the liberty interest that a woman has in her body.
I see. Yes.
Well, it makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to other people, but I've always saw it that way. I said, look, a child that can't survive outside the womb isn't something that the state can say, okay, this is really important to me, because it's not going to survive.
Right.
You're going to have to force the woman to act through that period to viability to get to the point where your compelling interest comes in and you can actually do something. That's the theory of it. So then in Casey, of course, it says it in unmistakable terms. It says, quote, viability is still the linchpin to our analysis.
Okay.
All right, so he's trying to pretend that he can depart from that, uphold this Mississippi law that lowers it to 15, which by any measure, there's no measure that could see that as holding to the viability analysis. So why is 15 protected constitutionally? What's the idea there? Roberts didn't articulate any, and no one has actually defended the argument that Roberts is making, really. I mean, there's no briefing that supports what he's trying to do, which is pretend that he's upholding Roe and Casey when, in fact, he's overruling it. Now, this is a Roberts special. He does this all the time. Yesterday, before the arguments, Jonathan Adler, who's a conservative law professor at Case Western Reserve, said, this is the court that has overturned least precedents than anybody else, any other court in the post-war period. And I'm like, well, you mean formally saying we overrule? Yeah, I mean, that's true, because they overrule by pretending that the case says something else than what it actually says. That's a Roberts special. And he wants to do another one.
It presents the same problems as counting the number of filibusters during a certain Congress.
Right, but remember, it's a political decision. There's no real legal thing to hang on. It's purely political. We don't want the court to lose legitimacy, will say Roberts, by saying we've overruled Roe and Casey.
Yeah, okay. So
right.
We'll just say
that's his answer to Breyer. And of course, Sotomayor, backing Breyer up, says, Mississippi says, when it passed this law, it says, look, we have these 3 new justices. Now we can win and overturn Roe and Casey.
Right.
He says, well, how does the court overcome the stench of this pure political thing as an institution? How does it survive how does its legitimacy survive? Well, its legitimacy shouldn't survive because it's a joke. But fine, you're trying to win the case. That was the thing. All the justices were advocates, basically, for whatever they were trying to argue. And they're arguing to Roberts. Okay, you got Roberts, but he's still arguing with you that he can do it and save the Mississippi law. And just lower the time to 15, right? That's his argument. I tell you, the thing that bugs me about Roberts doing that, and I say this because it's unbelievable. You know that it's been around 2.5 months now that women in Texas have had their constitutional right to abortion denied them by SB 8.
Right.
And there was a motion for stay that lost 5-4 because there was, this is confusing. Who do we issue the order against stuff?
Yes.
They don't care about that when it's an issue they want to happen. The vaccine mandates, the stuff comes right to mind because the Fifth Circuit and all these courts have just been insane. Literally just turned over all the law to do it, and they don't even, and they know the people suing don't have standing. The state of Texas does not have standing to sue the federal government over an OSHA or even the Medicare, the CMS requirement that hospitals that are in the Medicare and Medicaid system have to comply with their requirements for vaccinations. OSHA's requirement for vaccinations is directed not at Texas. It's directed at private employers who employ 100 or more. How does the state of Texas have standing to challenge those things?
I don't even know what the theory they advanced is, or if they advanced one. We have an interest in.
Well, they said some words. They said, this is really hard on Texas, or some nonsense. It was so half-assed that
it would have to be pretty tenuous. The idea, we have lots of businesses in Texas and something economy, so therefore.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like that stupid driver's license DAPA case. It's, this is, my old mantra about standing is the most nonsensical doctrine of all because the court decides whatever it wants to decide. And once they decide what they want to decide, they decide they're standing or not.
Right. The standing is just, either it's something to be gotten around or something to say, I don't know how logically to get the case I want, get the outcome I want out of this case, so we'll say we can't take it, or maybe I do get the outcome by not taking it.
Exactly.
And so therefore you kind of use it to avoid issues, and then but then if you can't figure out a way to pick up an issue that you really want, you just say, my standing's not that important to me. The state interest is, hey, there are some people who work for the state who say that's interesting. So there you go. Now it's a state interest.
And it's all political. Look, standing is actually used for other reasons by the justices for their own purposes. It's not always a workaround that has a political end, but most of the time it does. You want to join a state, or you want to join the federal government, or you want to do this, you just create whatever you want to create. And SB 8, of course, was a law that was designed to avoid federal pre-enforcement challenge. That is ostensibly what it wants to do, and any court of equity would see through it and say, you know what, this isn't that hard. You applied to play a game. I'm going to fashion a remedy that's going to stop you from playing the game, because an equitable court, in case people don't know, this is from the old common law.
Yeah.
There's courts of law, courts of equity. Court of law, I'm applying the law. Court of equity is basically a fallback. If the law doesn't cover it all, and what you're doing is illegal, but it doesn't give me a remedy in the law, I look to my equitable power and create one. That's the essence of equity.
Yes, old concept.
So it's there, and it's obvious that it should have been applied here. And it still hasn't been applied. That law should have been stayed immediately. There's, the balancing of the interest was clear. There's decisions from the one court that heard it, and then there's the Fifth Circuit's nonsense. But one court heard the arguments and addressed the merits. The other one came up with some hoo-ha. It says they put it off for briefing and oral argument 8 years from now. And still, this is talk about the politics of this. I thought they would have issued a decision on SB 8 by now, because then they could say, see, we weren't playing politics. We're against abortion. But no, now watch me in Dobbs in June, and I'll do it. But they didn't. This actually tells you how radicalized the politics of it is now in the court. That is, John Roberts has lost control.
Have you ever had it? Yeah.
Nobody else wants to play the politics with him. John Roberts is worried about the legitimacy of the institution. He's got, his little sources. Joan Biskup says, "Oh, this is what he's trying to do, trying to gut but not kill."
Well, yeah, I don't know why. There's really nothing that says he has to have that concern either. I guess it's something that made him, I don't know, makes him feel more important as chief. I suppose is that he's the guardian of the legitimacy of the court. If you believe that the court had any legitimacy. It would be extraordinarily, I guess, liberating for him to realize, this court didn't have legitimacy when I got here. So maybe I'm not, I don't have to tie myself up in knots. No one's going to impeach me from the court, even if the court has no legitimacy.
And they're definitely not going to expand. Look, Joe Manchin's making the coast is clear. But it's just funny, after a summer of speeches about how the court isn't political, how nakedly political the discussion was yesterday, the oral argument, so to speak. It really wasn't an oral argument at all. It was just a bunch of speeches from different justices, and they would use their question time to make their speech. Like one of the things that offended a lot of people was Alito saying, well, if precedent is so important, then why do you think Plessy v. Ferguson took so long? Why was Plessy reversed? Shouldn't it have been reversed the next day? You know what I mean? That kind of silliness. That's not a plausible point. Plessy was just wrongly decided, yes, and it took 50 years to get a court to admit that. Now, if he's trying to say, well, Roe was wrongly decided, fine.
I'm
Reverse
sure
it.
he would say so. Yeah.
Say so. Have the courage of convention. Don't be like John Robertson, who's trying to pretend he's not reversing it.
Right. Well, do you
By
think
the way,
Alito
of course,
is
all these
opposed
guys
to?
said it's settled law. It's settled law.
Oh boy, please.
Super precedent. Precedent on precedent. So listen, lying in confirmation hearings now is not perjury. It doesn't matter, and the Senate does. It just doesn't care.
Yeah, I mean that's essentially it. Yeah, the settled law thing was particularly galling to me yesterday, just because, the whole premise of the abortion, the anti-abortion movement has been no, it isn't settled law, or that perhaps there's no such thing. But at the same time, it's also it's very ironic that is literally the words they use to dodge having to answer any questions that might stop them from carrying out the 50-year mission to undo so-called settled law, or to finally admit there is no such thing. My own pet name for it that doesn't make sense to anybody else is the pre-wrong theory that everybody in any area of law, abortion or otherwise, the things that you know and learned about what the state of the law is and how the law works and what it says and what it means, and that's accepted to be the way it is, but that when those things upset conservatives, their theory is, well, you just don't know yet that you're wrong about all this stuff. Sure, there's Supreme Court precedent, 5 of them, that say you're right. And sure, the current state of things is that it's 7-2 in terms of voting on the Supreme Court that says you're right. But just you wait. I'm going to appoint justices who agree with the other 2. And we're going to do enough of them. And we're going to tell the Senate that, don't worry about it. We really believe it's settled law. Wink, wink. We're not going to do anything about it. And eventually, everything you know about the law, how it works, what it means, and what the bedrock constitutional principles upon which this country is founded means, changes the day that 5th person gets one of those robes. And you are not only going to find out that the things are going to change going forward, but that you were wrong this whole time and you just didn't know it, you poor sap. They told you the Constitution meant X. I kept telling you it meant Y. You didn't believe me because I was the only one. You said I was crazy. And then I went out and found 4 crazy friends. And now who's crazy now? You're the wrong one. And you've always been wrong. It was just a matter of me finding my friends.
Exactly. And the gun, the Second Amendment stuff is where that's most absolutely easy to track. The whole, It's an individual right thing. Didn't start until like the 70s.
Well, I think. Guess. Maybe. I
can't track it to the beginning. It was not controversial that there was no individual right to bear arms until the 1970s. I mean, I'm sure there were some wackos. I mean, you know what I mean? It was not mainstream. Our debate about that.
Right. They remembered the militia part, and the militias aren't individuals, and that's it.
Well, Scalia got on the court. The other guy got on the court, and all of a sudden they had 5. Oh, this 200-year understanding we had, we were wrong the whole time.
Yeah, we didn't know that.
And that's fine. Yeah. I just maybe they were wrong. Maybe it is an individual right. Who's to say? The reality is it's so.
I do acknowledge
such a morass.
There's at least one place where you would agree with that thinking. I mean, all you really have to do is bring up the issue of slavery and say, you're right. That actually would have been a good time to teach everybody that they had been wrong for 100 years. Right. And so great. So freedom expands and human rights are acknowledged. Whereas on the other hand, we traded it the other way and said, well, maybe they're correct on guns. Okay, maybe, but we are having a school shooting a week. How are we doing with this? People are killing each other over parking spaces.
It's outrageous. And, the funny, just to go back, I know we have a break in a second.
Yeah.
The Dred Scott case, why did it take so long, relatively speaking, to overturn it? Because of the politics of the court.
Yes. It couldn't be any other way. They knew what was at stake and what would happen if they had gone the other direction. Well, we'll take the status quo and ostensible peace, at least until I'm dead.
Right.
Okay. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Hi, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Armando is still with us, and we're still stuck on this idea. I mean, it was so striking in the hearing, apparently, and I wish I had a chance to listen along live, but certainly watching others observe it, and as you've recalled here, both you and Greg making the comment that this was different in kind, and this oral argument, and much less. It's almost always a charade anyway.
But they put
a very different kind of charade.
It's about the law on the charade. This time it was about the politics.
Yeah, no, and that was very interesting. And they didn't really. They were open about it and clear about it. And as you were saying, that you found that kind of refreshing. It's better to do it that way. I have to agree. You might as well be transparent about it.
But, I guess there's one possibility that you and I were talking off, and just before we get to the electoral politics of the politics of the court, assuming Roberts can persuade Kavanaugh to do his little, fake game of, we're not overturning Roe Casey, we're just upholding this law that actually violates Roe and Casey. So you get two to agree to that, fine, and you get three others to say, no, we're overturning Roe and Casey. I don't know how Roberts and Kavanaugh can get any. I guess Breyer could be the idiot that does it. Oh, my God. Wow, what a topper to that legacy. I just thought of that. Maybe they get Breyer to agree, and then that's the controlling opinion. Right? Can you imagine?
No,
I can't see Sotomayor and Kagan agreeing that the idea of upholding the law. But maybe Breyer. Wow. No. I can't see that. I mean, that would just destroy his legacy. To the degree he has a legacy, the way he thinks, I think he knows that this would be a disaster for him. So I don't know how Roberts even can do it. So he needs to convince Barrett, really, and I don't think there's any way he convinces her based on her questioning. So I don't think that's a real possibility.
Convince her to what?
To agree that they're not overturning Roe and Casey.
I see.
To uphold the Mississippi law, I believe, and most people believe, you have to overturn Roe and Casey. Roberts wants to uphold the Mississippi law and claim he hasn't overturned Roe and Casey.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get it. I guess, as you were saying, his theory is that there's some. I don't know.
Viability is central to the case.
Yes, okay.
And as long as it's not an undue burden to have an abortion, this is my speculation of what he would write. So, and it's my view that having a ban on abortions after 15 weeks is not an undue burden. That you should be able to get your abortion in 15 weeks.
So
look what they do in Europe, he said, in the case.
Oh, is it? By the way, does anybody?
Pardon?
Is it what they do in Europe?
Law, it was actually well argued by I forget who she was representing, one of the abortion clinics. Very good lawyer. her name escaped me, and she argued it very well. She said the difference in Europe, if you want, now we get to look at the European law, by the way. But the difference, she said, is that while there is a nominal, and he got upset with that thing, is the fact is that it's not a real thing. You basically can say, I really need it. It's an economic hardship. You can't just, in theory, just for any reason, in some European countries, have an abortion after 12 weeks. But you can, and you do. You just have to come up with a reason why you need to have it.
Oh.
It's going to upset me. It's going to be an economic hardship, whatever. And basically, it's understood that it's really not a ban. He says in here that we don't have any such restriction. But again, that's irrelevant to Casey and Roe, where viability is the drawing line. That's the way the decisions are.
Yeah, I mean, all right, that set up the whole argument for all of the future. That's an interesting point that I guess sometimes gets overlooked. I guess mostly, among people for whom abortion rights have been the established law, the settled law for their entire lives, or at least most of it. They don't necessarily think about how they came to that decision. The idea of, well, okay, how do we decide as between the rights of a woman to control her own person and whatever interest there might be from the state in this potential other person being born, and where do we draw that line? And the answer is at the point at which, theoretically, if the fetus were to just magically, be transporter beamed out of the body, would they be a person? Yeah, would they be able to survive on their own? And that's what made viability the standard. And viability, generally speaking, will not have changed in 50 years as to where it falls. I suppose some advances in medical technology. You could say it went
from 28 to 24 or something like that. You can't say
some variance. Right. So 15 has no basis in science, which is a big deal these days, making things, attaching things to science. So instead he says, all right, well, it might be the case that it has no basis in science, but it might also be the case that maybe it was just dumb to use science in the first place.
I think that's, when you boil it down, that is his argument that, you know what, science, and I think he's prepared to sort of gloss over Roe, but he would argue, and I think this is what his opinion, which I think will be a concurrence,
bad outcome,
will say, is that it's not an undue burden, and the standard isn't viability; it's whether this is an undue burden.
Right. There's 15 weeks enough time.
And if you have 15 weeks to get an abortion, that gives you plenty of time to get it done.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, like I said, it might not be a horrible thing to do. As big a fan of science as I think I'm trying to be these days with coronavirus and everything else, I mean, it's not out of the question to say, maybe science is a good basis for doing it, but I don't know if, say, any panel of the Supreme Court of any makeup is particularly suited to make a scientific decision anyway. So maybe decouple it from science and make it be, a little bit more about administrative law and drawing a bright line and saying 15 weeks is what it's going to be. That's as may be, but then again, I don't see why the panel is any better.
Right. What makes 15 okay, but 10 not okay? I mean, why isn't the 6?
No Supreme Court panel would be any better suited to make that decision than the scientific one. I don't know why.
Why aren't contraceptives enough?
And
why isn't listen, a whole ban on abortion isn't an undue burden on you because you should have been taking the pill.
I guess you could. Well, look, if you get 5 people who want to come to that conclusion,
exactly,
you can, and we're back at that stage of the game. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's not entirely nonsensical to say we're not a medical board. We shouldn't have made this decision based on viability. But then, what other basis would you want?
judgments all
They
the time.
do.
And,
They do, and they have to.
Medical malpractice cases and everything. And remember, cases don't spring up willy-nilly at the Supreme Court. They start at a trial court somewhere. And there's, Sotomayor talked about it. There's an important Supreme Court case on expert testimony called Daubert, and it sets the standard for how a judge decides whether to accept expert testimony. And then, after accepting it, the judge decides which expert is right.
That's true, and you would get past that. You'd say you're really, you're glossing over so much to say, well, it's an easy platitude and bumper sticker-ish to say, well, judges shouldn't be making medical decisions. Well, they're not making medical decisions. They're making a legal decision of was the expert opinion on the medicine that was offered something that's reasonable to believe in. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Well, even better, imagine it's a trial, and there's a jury of 12 laymen who obviously, the chances of someone leaving a doctor or
are these 12 plumbers any better?
The jury would be very slim. They're making medical decisions. I mean, they're making scientific judgments.
I guess they are. They're being presented
if there's two competing
scientific
experts,
evidence.
They're going to decide which expert they believe based on what? Science?
Right. So,
okay, if you say so.
Yeah, so I guess on the one hand, you could say, well, we could adopt any standard and it wouldn't have to be scientific. That's an okay position to argue
when you adopt viability as a legal standard.
Well, yeah.
And by the way, it's not that controversial in the medical community. I mean, what is the accepted viability date? Well, the lowest you'll see is 23, 24 weeks. It had been around 28 at the time of Roe, but now they think with the advancements of science, a preemie born,
so that's the only thing that would have
23,
changed.
24 weeks has a 50-50 chance of survival.
Which is a legitimate answer to Sotomayor's question. What's changed? Well, okay, it's not a huge amount, but things have changed.
A little bit.
In terms of your test, anyway.
And if it changes more in the future, then viability will push it down. But right now, that's the whole point. There is an answer to viability, and it's around 24 weeks. And if Mississippi banned abortions after 24 weeks, this would be a different case. You could definitely say this complies with Roe and Casey using the viability standard. Yeah. But it's not what they chose because they want to overturn Roe and Casey.
Yeah. Well, now that helps make the stakes of the case a little clearer for people.
Right. Well, let's see what happens. So let's assume that come the last day of June, because it'll be the last decision they announce, on June 30th or whatever the last Friday is, or the last day of opinions, 27, 28, 29, Roe, Casey overturned by Supreme Court in 6-3 decision.
Yeah.
All right. Let's say that's what the headline is. Well, what do we have to? Well, activists and people who are invested in the issue, and as a matter of what I think is right, I'm invested, but I don't go out there and fight in the trenches. I don't represent people. I don't fight these battles. I don't lobby legislators. I don't do any of these things. So when I talk about people who care, I mean people who are, that's what they do. What should they do? Well, one thought I had is, well, you know what I'd start doing? In every blue and purple state, I'd be gearing up, and I would do it now. I wouldn't even wait for the decision to enshrine in your state constitution a protection of the right to choose.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that would be the way to prepare for something like this, certainly.
Well, that's not only a practical response in those states to what's coming. It's also, I think, a way to energize your voters so that we elect legislators who are going to act at the state level and hopefully even on the federal level to eventually, again, in 2022, it's not likely to happen, but maybe 2026, 2028. You know what I mean? This issue, I believe, remember, this is a base issue for the Republican Party. It's been great for them, for money, for fundraising,
for a long time,
for activism, for getting core voters out. Our side, we floated on it. We had Roe. We had Casey. Yeah, there was attacks on the edges here and there. And sometimes the court would sustain a post-viability regulation that we didn't like. But by and large, 95% of women were able to get an abortion no matter where they lived. The Texas ended up having like 3 abortion clinics, and Mississippi only has 1. I get that kind of stuff has succeeded in its own way, but again, an all-out ban on the protection, absence, living in the right state, is new. And I do think that's a new political landscape on this issue.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess since we're talking about the politics of it and what kind of backlash it might generate, and I guess we were focusing, or Greg and I were, at least when we were talking about it, focusing on the national level backlash of it. But it's an interesting possibility. I mean, as long as you're entertaining the possibility of political backlash. I don't want to bank on it, but
well, you don't bank on anything, but
right.
What you do is if you look, I mean, it's the right thing to do, whether it works or not. But
yes,
to me, I think it has a good chance of working.
Your idea of handling it,
and it'll be a good thing if it does work, because then we'll protect women's right to abortion in as many states as we can until we can do something at the federal level.
I mean, it really would be an interesting backfire for if they were to say adopt Kavanaugh's formulation of it. All right, well, we'll kick it back to the states, and then we were able to say to people, well, guess what? Here's a new twist for you. On the local level, you can either save or abandon these rights for yourself in the very next election in your state. And for the first time in decades, all of a sudden, your state legislature's races are important to you. You actually will make a difference. What rights do I have as a citizen of this state? Will I protect them or will I not protect them? Will I have to flee the state if I want to exercise this right or not? That could be very energizing for some extremely important elections that Democrats have ignored for a long, long time. But because we have, it's also discouraging. We might actually accidentally ignore them again and lose worse.
I would hope we wouldn't, but I just to connect it to an issue I think everybody would recognize is hugely important is who is going to be the governors of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania in 2024.
Yeah.
Because as the Electoral Count Act exists at this time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Sorry. Give me a second.
Something?
I got a beep coming in. I got to ignore it. As the Electoral Count Act exists at this time, the certification signed by the governor is the supreme document for counting votes, at least in theory. Congress, I guess, could ignore that, but at least theoretically, if the governor of Wisconsin is Evers, and the governor of Michigan is Whitmer, and the governor of Pennsylvania is Josh Shapiro, and they signed the electoral vote certification in 2024, and hopefully Joe Biden wins those 3 states. It's going to be hard to fight that. But if it's the other guys and they say no, there was fraud, and I'm sending in one with Donald Trump, then you've got a whole other ball of wax.
Right. Yeah. Well, those races will be important. I was sort of thinking this isn't what they had in mind back in the days when Howard Dean was advocating a 50-state strategy, but this would be an interesting twist on the 50-state strategy. You're going to have to defend your rights in every state, and you're going to define for the rest of the country which states are ones with rights and which states are ones without. And by the way, should you lose the initial contest, you should not give up because, as you know, it could be that everyone in your state was just wrong about what the actual state of women's health and reproductive rights in your state are, and you can prove it to them next election.
Well, and to take it beyond the electoral realm, how about where corporations decide where they're going to be located?
Yeah, that too. We've seen it happen on this issue and others.
Yeah,
that people pack up and walk away. That's true, and it might become an interesting jobs issue as well. And I gather that it could happen on any number of issues. If say Kavanaugh were to have his way, there's no reason why abortion is certainly not the only right that he would likely think, or that others would argue on his behalf, either genuinely or as trolling him, that ought to be passed back to the states. But it could happen on a number of things. You're really going to have to take, it comes down to you have to take responsibility for how you want to be governed and vote all the time, everywhere, not just leave it to others, even though it seems like boring stuff. Vote for my school board. Oh, that's so boring. I don't even know who's running. Vote for judges in the terrible places where they do that. I don't know anything about them. Vote for state legislature. Well, you have a lot less excuse there. They're putting things in your mailbox every day. Read them and vote accordingly.
Well, I think that's the part of the equation that I think you can take a different view of it, as Brian Beutler did on Twitter yesterday. I just think that it's hard to imagine how that doesn't improve Democratic performances. And frankly, if it doesn't, maybe the voters just don't agree with us on abortion. Maybe they just don't.
I don't know. Every time they ask them,
then
we
have
to
decide what that means.
Right.
I don't think that's true. I think the opposite. I think that when this is put to the real life test, that you're going to find that most people are pro-choice. But we for 50 years we really haven't had that test, and now I think we will.
Yeah. Well, I guess so, and you'll be responsible for casting your vote on it. It is worrisome because all the other dumb things that we've done collectively in the past. I sometimes.
Well, I think your state's going to be a test. It'll be interesting.
Yeah. Well,
Youngkin lied to all these people. I don't think Youngkin would. I think Youngkin's the kind of guy that's going to burn the anti-choice people. Personally, I think that that's a choice he'll make, because I think he'll see it's not a great issue for him. But it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, and of course, the other thing I keep forgetting it, but every time it comes up, he can't run for re-election, at least not right away. So it'll be interesting to see how he deals with something like that. Like, this might not be a wise move for me to give the Trump
try to be a
forces
senator.
what they
I
want.
guess would be his next move, right?
I guess so. And
that's run for president. He's not going to run against Trump. So
I wouldn't count on it. But there's not a lot of places to go. So I don't know. See what he does. He'll want to maintain his political viability for something, but what, we don't know. And whether
I actually never understood why that guy ran. Back when McDonnell ran, Virginia was still, purple.
Yeah. Which you don't understand why Youngkin ran? Or why they settled on him?
I know why McDonnell ran, back in 2009.
Yeah. Right. Oh, for president?
He could see a political future in Virginia.
I see, yeah.
And beyond. Youngkin goes where from here? Anyway, that's off topic.
Yeah,
it's just interesting to me. It's just a rich guy wants to do something, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, they need a hobby. So they're going to govern you. For fun.
I think. What else is there for him? I
don't know.
Is he going to really make big policy changes? Maybe, I guess. I don't know.
It's always possible, but yeah, I like the idea that, I voted for him. What he ran to represent us so that we would have our voices heard, and he'd be listening to the people who've been ignored for too long. Yeah, that's exactly what hedge fund CEOs do.
Exactly.
You made a great choice. They love advice from you.
They're people. They're of the people. men of the people. These hedge fund
They're
guys.
sick and tired of being, downtrodden all the time.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Well, okay. Anyway,
all right. Anyway,
we may have exhausted
that's all
that.
I've got.
Okay.
I'll let you wrap it up.
Okay. Damn.
With your deep thoughts.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, I used all of those up, but thank you. It was an extraordinarily important day yesterday, and and I felt badly that I wasn't. I knew we would have to discuss it, and I felt badly that I wouldn't get the time that it needed without any other voice, but certainly it would be much better if it was yours as opposed to, say, someone at random.
I followed the court closely, as you know.
Absolutely. So.
All right, man. I am going to sign off.
Okay.
And wish everybody a good day, and I'll keep listening.
Okay, and keep watching what's happening and who's analyzing what went on yesterday, and send us anything that might catch your eye that you think is worth including, and perhaps we can work it into more discussion about this tomorrow. You know, people will be analyzing this and reanalyzing it and slicing it and dicing it any number of ways. So there's more to be said, and maybe some of you have some of that to say. And I remind you that it is always wide open for you to contribute to the show, and you can do it as directly as I think any other podcasts really offer this up regularly, like daily on our recorded version of downloadable podcasts, with a little advertisement every day to remind you that if you think we missed something, like this is a convenient excuse, this is a great cover. Like after all of my excuse making, if you're still unsatisfied, say, how could you not have a woman on to analyze what went on in yesterday's Supreme Court oral arguments about what might be the end of federal abortion rights? And the answer is, I don't know. I woke up this morning and I was like, okay, I've got to wing another show today. Oh, yeah, right. Oh, well, we need some legal analysis. Okay, well, actually, Armando is offering to do that. Great. Well, what about having women's voices on? I would have to probably, though any woman that would be willing to do that is probably busy, and I can't just call at 8:50 and say, please do this thing. That's it. That's the extent of it. There's no plot to keep women's voices off the air. In fact, if you think that there should have been one and you have something to say, and I say, I can't believe that there was no woman on to represent this particular point, then pick up your phone, your cell phone, your smartphone, whatever you might have handy, well, it better be a smartphone, because otherwise, like picking up your house phone won't do you any good. But record it. Say what you had to say. Read somebody else's. Maybe you just think that I'm not a woman, but I saw one who had a great opinion and brought into it a very unique viewpoint that men just either simply won't or can't represent, and she wrote it and she published it in, I don't know, Slate, The Atlantic, I don't care where it is, the Washington Times, a Breitbart. If you think it works, read it. I didn't write this and I'm not a woman, but this person is and they wrote this, and I'm reading it to you because I can't believe you didn't include it in yesterday's show. And then send me the recording and I will play it, and then I will, maybe have fulfilled my obligation in the best way I can, being a person with no budget and winging the show daily. And because we don't do it like actually super professionally and doesn't pay for full-time anything for anybody, you can't spend the day arranging for guests who can handle these things or digging up every single article. And even if I did spend the day on it, I'd miss something you saw. So add it to the show. You have that opportunity. I beg you, please do it, because it means that's something I don't have to figure out how to deal with. And I feel like, I'm doing a good thing here. I'm giving somebody who was frustrated or was very happy to just share their opinion, or somebody else's opinion that they thought was great, and they got it on the show that they like to listen to, and therefore they have some ownership in what goes on. That's a good thing, I think, right? Yeah, is that a good enough excuse for you? All right, well, it's actually time for us to wrap it up now. I knew that this would go this way, and it was fine by me. I like to have these discussions. I love having other voices on the air to interact with. It's always good to hear from Armando. Everyone seems to like that. We got to wrap it up, though, and hand it over to Justice Putnam. We should just bring Justice on early and just let him do the last 10 minutes of the show at the same time. It's very early in the morning there, and then he's recorded all his stuff, and he's prepared his own thing. I don't mean to interfere. I don't know. More voices would be a good thing. All right, well, we'll pick up where we left off today, which is to say that we ignored all of the news of the day. We'll pick it up tomorrow, Friday, being sort of free and open and, can go in any direction. We can bring the esoteric stories that we missed up. We can recap the stories of the day from today that we may have missed. But if you're hungry for that analysis right here, right now, well, the thing to do is to stay tuned here to Netroots Radio for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It comes up next. Sometimes he brings up the things that we ignore. Sometimes he brings up the same things we talked about, but brings a fresh perspective to it. What has he got online for today? Let's see. Well, right where we thought he'd pick up. Will we have a legitimate form of law if women have less than full rights? That's a fundamental question that we didn't even begin to address. Is it law? Is what we're describing here even law if half the population has a huge amount of their human rights denied? That is a great question and a great framing. On the rest of the menu, the January 6th panel voted to charge former DOJ official Jeffrey Clark in criminal contempt. Did make mention of that. The GOP will risk a government shutdown to fight Biden over the vaccine mandates for federal workers, of all things, to pick to that to be the hill that you actually literally maybe die on is pretty amazing. And forcing its first work stoppage since 1995, Major League Baseball owners have locked out the players.
EdwardsRadio.com.
Who aren't playing right now, by the way.
Listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
I actually would like to hear more about that because what are they locked out of exactly? I don't know. Maybe it's just an expression. But at any rate, we'll hear more about that. Plus, there's, of course, news from around the world. Russia has warned some U.S. diplomats will have to leave by January 31st. Let's find out what that's all about. It's probably not great. Stay tuned.